Veronica Parker with AEBG TAP. Today's webinar is on the NOVA Annual Plan Submission and Forecasting with Neil Kelly and Nicole Alexander of the AEBG office. For those of you who are joining us, earlier today I did send out a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. If you were unable to download that presentation or do not have access to it right now, you are more than welcome to download the PowerPoint presentation from Adobe Connect. The PowerPoint presentation is located in the Resources pod. If you select the file and then hit Download File, it will download to whatever browser your computer utilizes for downloading. And then you can open it up, save it, and follow along that way. And please post any questions in the chat pod. Throughout the presentation, Neil and Nicole may get to your questions. If they do not get to your questions immediately, there will be time at the end to answer any and all questions. There's a lot of content to be covered this afternoon, so we want to make sure that we get through as much of it as possible and then answer questions at the end. So if your question isn't answered immediately, please hold tight and it will be answered before the end of this webinar. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the new California Adult Education website, and I'll be sure to type the URL in the chat pod so that everyone will know exactly where the PowerPoint will be posted. I do see a couple people have lost sound, so I will handle that in just a moment. But a simple way to adjust that is to just log out of Adobe Connect and come back in. Usually that fixes any problems. Please also make sure the sound icon is selected from yellow to white. If you are hearing a echo at this time and you have a number 2 next to your name in the attendees list, it could be because you're logged into Adobe Connect more than once. When someone's logged in more than once, there tends to be interference in the system. So please be sure to log out, come back in, and make sure that you're only logged in once. I do see in the attendee list that there are people who are utilizing abbreviations for their name. We do take attendance throughout the presentation. We want to make sure that we account for everyone. So if you have marked an acronym or are using initials, please be sure to let me know exactly what your name is so that we can make sure that we account for everyone in our attendance. Also, if you're in the room with multiple people, please be sure to let us know so that we can mark everyone and account for everyone accurately. Okay, I do see a few people who are having issues, so I'll go ahead and take care of them. At the end of the webinar, you will receive an evaluation. Please be sure to fill out that evaluation. It's our way of providing feedback to Neil and Nicole, as well as addressing your technical assistance and professional development needs. Now I will turn it over to Neil, who will get us started. Neil?
Thanks, Veronica. And we do have Ryan French from Product Ops joined us, so he'll be coming along for the ride today. And so it looks like we have a pretty large group, a little smaller than usual, but I think these are the diehards, the Nova groupies, our fan base that are on the line. And today you're going to get something special because I think this is about the 3rd or 4th time we've gone through a Nova webinar, and we have figured out a lot of the bugs or able to answer your questions. Nicole is going to walk us through a lot of these process steps with screenshots, and Ryan will be available to answer those technical questions if there's some kind of software thing or programming thing that's not working on your end. We should be able to troubleshoot that today during the webinar. So with that said, let's take a look at the agenda. A couple of upfront items we'll go over, just the reconciliation we're going through between the two systems. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the additional funding exercise that, for the most part, direct funded consortia are going through right now. I don't know if we'll talk a little bit about allocation amendments. I think Nicole will cover that in her review of the process steps. But I will talk about indirect. There's been some confusion about indirect. I'll talk a little bit about expense reporting. Nicole will go through that process. We'll talk about spending targets, annual plans. We'll have a kind of a larger segment on annual plans, and then just one slide on 3-year plans of what you can expect coming up later this summer. And then Hopefully we'll have plenty of time for open discussion. We do have an hour and a half, so we're going to leave a lot of time to answer your questions, walk through any issues you might be having with the NOVA system as people file their Q3 expenditures. So hopefully we'll take care of everything today. All right. Oh, and feel free to download the PowerPoint presentation in the far left-hand corner. All you have to do is click on that and download it, and that's yours. And those are the slides that we'll be using today. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Sometimes during Nicole's presentation, she likes to go through the process steps before answering questions. So just be aware that we'll get to everyone's questions. Sometimes we won't get to them right away, but we will circle back and answer your questions like we always do. Okay, and Veronica is going to be working with people on the sound issue, and here we go. So first thing we're going to talk about is reconciliation. So as you know, we have the NOVA system. Before that, we had the WebEx Chancellor's Office system, whatever you want to call it, MIS, WebEx, Chancellor's Office. So the difference between those two systems is the Chancellor's Office system collected expenditures at the consortia level. And there was direction that even though we're collecting at the consortia level, you have to have backup expenditure reports at the member level that support that summary expenditure report you're giving us at the consortia level. So this was all fine and well until we moved to a different system. So NOVA is a member-based system, different than the old system because that's consortia-based. And so now we have all the member budgets, member work plans, and member expenditures all available for everyone to see. We've never had that before. It really gives us a lot of transparency, a lot of good information that we have now that we didn't, but we did have to transition between the two systems. So our last report in the old system was July 2017. And because we closed out 15-16 money, all you had to report in that July 2017 report was your 16-17 expenditures. And so that remaining balance should match what the carryover of everybody's reporting into NOVA. In a lot of cases, it didn't. So we're working with people to reconcile that. And there's two ways, as you can see on the slide, that you can reconcile. You can adjust the last report in the old system, that's report 2, filed probably at the end of July or early August of 2017, and you can work with Nicole and adjust that system or that final report, or you can send us an email from your financial person that says, hey, we've got all the documentation, we balance, we reconcile, we have that on file. Use this email to put in our files that it reconciles, we're fine. And we'll take that as well. So you have either option to work through, just so we can, if we're ever audited, we can follow the trail and it reconciles, or we have documentation and proof that someone has done the reconciliation. So, pause for any questions on that. That shouldn't be a big issue. We really like the fact that we're using NOVA and it's member-based. Helps us a lot. So JC says, can you give a nudge the consortia that is unreconciled? So we had quite a few. So I can't really say which ones, but I would say a majority of them. It wasn't just like 5 or 10. It was more like 30 or 40. So they've all been notified. And so I would just check with your consortia director if you're not aware of that, how things are going. Because you wouldn't see that on NOVA. It's kind of behind the scenes. And we'll be tracking that. So if we don't get the email saying it's been reconciled or the adjustment in the old system, we'll follow back up with that consortia director and say, okay, how's it going with that reconciliation? So it doesn't really answer your question, JC, but kind of gives you the perspective. Okay, moving on to additional funding. So we found out when the trailer bill was released a few weeks ago, that Department of Finance adjusted the COLA. And so when they adjusted the COLA, I guess there were some percentages, I don't know, out to the tenths or the hundredths or whatever, but it resulted in another $1 million to AEBG. So instead of a $20.5 million COLA, it's a 21.5. And so you've already submitted your CFAD, so it's kind of like panic. What do we do? So for the most part, the fiscal agents, it's fine because that money goes to the fiscal agent anyway. So we can follow back up with them with an allocation amendment. Where we had to get a little creative, it was with the direct funding or direct funded agencies. You know, those consortia that get their money directly instead of going through a fiscal agent. So we had to ask them how they wanted that extra money. In some cases, it's only like $2,000 to the consortia. If you're a large consortia, it could be like $50,000. And if you're the biggest consortia, it could be like $100,000. So, but we still have to figure that out for the interagency agreement and figure out who's going to get that. So Nicole has been working with the, I think it's 24, 25 or such and such of the direct funded consortia and asking them, okay, we've got this small amount of extra money that we were given. How do you want to program? So we're getting that feedback from each of the consortia, and we're moving forward with that, and we're in the process of that right now. So any questions about that? I'll pause there for a second. So it's a little extra money, nothing substantial, but it does have to be programmed. When will we find out the amounts? So if you're a fiscal agent, we'll probably post something. Once Nicole hears back from all the direct funded agencies, we'll probably post something on the website and put it in the newsletter to say, you know, here's the extra funding, and then we'll have some process steps for the fiscal agents. I don't know, Nicole, if you want to chime in on for the ones with fiscal agents, how we're going to notify them. So the question from Salinas Valley, what's your thoughts on that?
We're going to go ahead and update all of the documentation that we have on the website as far as what the total allocations are. And then I will be sending an email out to the fiscal agent consortia to let them know what additional funding that they're getting. And I'll be working with them to make their allocation changes in NOVA. For the fiscal agents, we do have a little bit more time or flexibility because at the end of the day, all of the money is going to the same entity, and it's the fiscal agent that is making the distribution. So we don't need to know the actual member allocations right away. It's a little bit different for direct funded because we need to know exactly who's getting what amount so we can set up our payments from the state. So we have already worked up a proposal for the direct funded consortia, and we based the additional $1 million allocation, the additional dollars that your consortia would receive. We did some calculations and based that on the proportion of what that member already received of the COLA. But we're double checking with the consortia leads to make sure that we have that accurate, because the way NOVA collected the information, we weren't always able to clearly identify. So we're working with the leads on that for the direct funded, and we will be programming those funds into NOVA for the direct funded agencies. But we will have information in the newsletter, and we will have updated information posted on the website. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me as well.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. So Holly from TAP. Okay, well, so Erica is saying we are direct funded. Do I have to modify the CFAD? Nicole will work back with you on that. Erica, she'll explain the process steps if you're the consortia director. Okay. So, indirect, moving along. So just a couple of reminders on indirect in NOVA. So members must report their indirect. And that's indirect as defined in your accounting manual. So if you go to the CDE website and you click on indirect and you go to the indirect cost rate page, they have a nice frequently asked questions about what indirect is. And it lists all the activities that incorporate with indirect. So you have to report those indirect charges on the indirect line in NOVA. We were hearing some people were reporting operational costs on the indirect line. So operational costs are not indirect costs. And you have to go back to the CDE website of what indirect costs are so you can separate the difference between operational costs and indirect costs. And your accounting people should know that. So we don't want to see indirect costs reported in object code 7000 in NOVA, because then we can't calculate if you're meeting the CDE approved rate. So you'll be out of compliance if we can't calculate that. Because that's, and then with the compliance language in the trailer bill for next year saying CDE indirect rate approved or 5%, whichever's less, we need to be able to verify that as well. I'll pause there for a second. There's not enough time to hold a public meeting on allocation, additional allocation. Is July the only month we have to make CFAD changes if our consortium wants to make a change to the additional allocation? So Annabelle, I'm not sure if that's related to the increase in the COLA or just an allocation change. A few different answers there. So if you can specify which one. Yes, related to the increase in COLA. So Annabelle, I would work that back through with Nicole. She's on a real sensitive timeline. Like she needs to know by Monday. And so if you can't, then I would work it out with Nicole, whatever, because she has to get this program. So there's no ifs, ands, and buts, no extensions, times, whatever. So please work offline with Nicole on that one. Laura asks, our indirect and operational costs are only calculated and billed by the district annually at the end of the fiscal year. Is it okay for me to report 0 for now and explain in the notes? Yeah, as long as we have a chance to check to see if you're reporting based on the CDE approved indirect rate, that's fine. So you don't have to put anything now if you're not ready. But eventually, you know, by the end of the year, you will have to put something in there, and we'll have to see if you're meeting the CDE approved rate. So that sounds pretty doable. Okay, and then so I'm not sure, is that a 5100, do not get indirects? Can this be built into NOVA as a separate line item? So in NOVA, we just have the major object codes. We don't have any sub codes, like we have 5000s. We don't have 5100, 5200. That's what you do at the local level with your accounting people. For us, for reporting for AEBG on NOVA, just report via the object codes 1000s through 7000s and indirect. And then if you want to go specific or denote different things, I don't know, Ryan might be able to tell us, or Nicole, if there's detail below the object code that allows it to split out. I don't know if that's available in NOVA or not. Ryan or Nicole, do you know that?
I don't believe so. I believe we
not.
just, yeah. Sorry, Ryan.
Go ahead, Nicole. No, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, that we just have it at the object code level.
That is correct.
Okay. So if DGLANS is going to do something below that, that's on them to do on their own books, however they keep their books at the district office. It won't show up in NOVA that way.
Yes.
Nor do we kind of want to use NOVA for those purposes. Use your own accounting system that you have for compliance and audit purposes at the district. Moving on to the next slide, more indirect. Since you're so excited about indirect, we decided to give you another slide. So just a reminder, the 17-18, if you're a county office or K-12 adult, use the CDE approved indirect rate. Colleges use the agreed upon indirect rate. if you go into Nova and you put in your approved indirect rate and it comes up red, please ignore this for now. This was the programming in Nova for 1819. So it doesn't really go into effect until we start reporting Q1 of 1819. So please ignore any red on the indirect. As long as you are using the CDE approved indirect rate, even if it's red, you're okay. But starting in 1819, the K-12 and county offices will use the CDE approved indirect rate or 5%, whichever is less. So you could use those red indicators this year to say, who's going to be over possibly next year? And you could see how many members are over that 5%. So you'll have to keep an eye, consortia directors, when that comes in, that they're either at 5% or the CDE approved rate. And we would expect the consortia director to validate that. We're not going to be, checking everything. So when the consortia director certifies that, when the district certifies that, we're assuming that they've checked their indirect rate and they're using the approved rate or 5%, whichever is less. So we're going to rely upon the consortia level administration to support us on that. And then, of course, colleges use the agreed upon indirect rate or 5%, whichever is less. Same thing. Okay, we have a question from Jacques. Member tried to enter 0 in the indirect rate, but the system won't accept a 0. Seems for now that the only way you can enter 0, I think, on the budget possibly, but you can't enter a 0 indirect rate. I don't know. I'll ask Ryan and Nicole to chime in on that as far as input into the indirect rate column or box.
I can speak to it, Nicole. Currently, that is correct. 0 is not a legitimate budget item, which I think is okay. So if there are indirect expenses that are anticipated, but they're not known if they're done annually, like the example in the chat, there will be a fiscal reporting item for indirect expenses when you do the fiscal reporting item. So if you're not budgeting for it, there is the opportunity to input the actual indirect expenses in fiscal reporting. And it's okay if those two don't tie out exactly. Obviously, the best scenario would be to budget for the indirect expense if you have that insight. But if you don't, you can do the fiscal reporting.
Okay. Hopefully everybody heard that, Ryan. You're a little garbled, but I think we heard that. Appreciate that. And then
I'll put it
Jody.
in the chat as well.
Okay. Thank you. Jody says, what is the CCD agreed upon rate? So there's no state level indirect rate like K-12s have. So there is a negotiated rate, and the negotiated rate for the colleges is usually like 20 and 30%, because that's based on the federal negotiated rate. And so we allow a agreed upon rate, meaning the college and the members agree upon what that indirect rate should be. Certainly we don't see 20 and 30% being charged, nor would members allow it. Usually it's something a lot less. And so that's what we mean by the agreed upon rate. Hopefully that makes sense. It's in the fiscal reporting as well. If you go to indirect rate, you can click on the link that takes you to that language in the budget and accounting manual for the community colleges if you're really interested in that. So Laura's saying, are you saying that I should calculate the indirect and operational expenditures up to Q3 and put those in despite the district not charging us yet? Ryan, if you could come back on and kind of answer Laura's question, because she seems a little bit confused on the direction we're giving her.
Sure. I think that's a bit more of a policy question, but I mean, my point of view would be that if you're anticipating indirect expenses, make your best calculation, log that as a budget item for indirect expenses, and then if that's not an exact match to the actual expenses, we would capture that in the fiscal reporting.
Right, because you could always do a budget change later. What you don't want to do is probably report more than that you anticipate or report more expenditures than you're allowed. So you could put something in kind of a conservative estimate, like Ryan's saying, and that could work. If you don't know that until towards the end of the year, you can always do a budget change later, and you can do a budget change at any time of the year. Is there any legal document for indirect at K-12 site yet? So the trailer bill language will be signed on July 1, if not sooner. And once that trailer bill is signed, that's the legal binding document that talks about the indirect rate. CDE updates their indirect rates every April, so that you have 1819 indirect on the CDE website. That's a legal binding indirect rate created by CDE. So we have a district that wants to see more than what I can show them. So I would show them the indirect rate on CDE. I would show them the proposed trailer bill language that we've put about 3 times in the newsletter, stating that. We do have a CFAD letter that's coming out that will further go over that language once we approve all the CFADs, once we get this additional allocation item taken care of. So that's about the extent of what we can give you. Trailer bill language, indirect rate on the CDE website, as well as the CFAD letter that'll be coming out. Nicole, did you have something to offer? Nope. Okay.
That wasn't me, but I can answer the next question that I.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so Bronca is asking, CAREC has a member that does not receive any funding. LRCCD representative has not gone in to submit their $0 budget yet. Will he have technical issues? So I would say if you have a member that participates and they're part of the consortium, but they don't receive funding, then to leave their budget in draft status and do not submit a budget. If a budget is submitted, if you submit a $0 budget, then the system is going to require that an expenditure report is submitted before. And the way that NOVA works is that all member reports have to be submitted before the consortia lead can certify the reports for that period. So it will create technical difficulties if you certify a budget for $0. So the best thing to do is that if you to leave that budget in draft status.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, so since this was such a robust discussion, I think I have one more indirect slide. Imagine that. And we do. Here it is. So these are just reminders, but I'm sure it'll generate some questions. Don't confuse the indirect for members with the consortia level administrative 5% cap. So we have a lot of 5% going around, right? We have next year, we'll have the indirect, approved indirect rate or 5%, whichever's less, which people get confused with the consortia level admin 5%. And then they say, well, what can I charge? So don't confuse. They're two separate things. The AEBG office is working on a prototype. Product Ops has the prototypes. We're just trying to work through it for consortia level budget and expenditure reporting related to program expenses and administrative expenses. And so that will come out sometime, in the next maybe few months or so. And that will allow you to separately show us what's happening at the consortia level program-wise, what's happening at the consortia level administrative-wise. So hang on to that and don't confuse that consortia level admin 5% cap with all the discussion that we've been having on member indirect rates. Two different things reported separately. Just words of advice on that one. Let's see if we have any questions here. Oh, thank you for creating the consortia level feature. All right. So we've got one true believer out there. Let's move. Oh, and then here's a clarification on not on indirect, but reporting expenses. So we came across this during the reconciliation. We issued some state memos about a year ago that said, do not report any pass-through funds Actually, we didn't release that memo, but in NOVA, we do not want any of the pass-through funds reported in NOVA. All that gets reported in NOVA is after the pass-through, when the members receive the funds, the members receive this as revenue, they have to report a budget, they have to report expenditures. So in the past, some of the fiscal agents were reporting the pass-through in the old system as expended. And that's a no-no. We want to move away from that. And so hopefully in NOVA, there's no chance of the fiscal agent reporting anything in NOVA. It all goes to the member, and the member's responsible for reporting that allocation, that budget, and those expenditures. Fiscal agents cannot report the passing through of funds in NOVA. These are not expenditures. Pass-through is not revenue. See memos on website. So hopefully that's the last discussion we will have on pass-through of funds and fiscal agents. The only thing that fiscal agents have to worry about now is the 45-day rule, meaning as soon as they receive the funds, they have 45 days to get that out to their members. And they get it, usually they get 11 installments. It's supposed to start in August, go through June. And each time they get the money from state controllers or county office, they have 45 days to get that out to members. And that's their only job. Unless you add on other responsibilities at the consortia level, that's up to your consortia to figure out. Okay, so, and Bronca likes that feature too. So Corley says, is there a demo of what needs to be submitted for our action plan should they be red flagged in NOVA? So Corley, you don't have to worry about that now. You will have to worry about that next year. But what I would advise, there's no action plan necessary. Since if you're the consortia lead or director, you just don't approve any of those budgets or any of those expenditures if next year they exceed the CDE approved rate or the 5% threshold. So you can hold back on approval and tell them to change that. And that's what we would advocate to how to adhere to the new trailer bill language. And hopefully that makes sense. So it's really your responsibility, and you have the tools to approve or deny it. So it really shouldn't be coming up to the state for us to figure that out. You guys should be taking care of that at the local level. Kathy said, where do I find the memo on the pass-through? So if you go to the funding page on the website, it should be, there's a memo, and then there's guidance from K-12. They have a frequently asked questions website that talks about how to record, whether it's a subcontract or it's a pass-through. There's all kinds of coding for the SACS reporting for K-12 and county offices, and that's right out of their manual on how to report that. So if you want to send us an email offline, we can show you on the website where that, oh, there it is. All right, thank you. Well, imagine that. Okay, so we're going to get into Nicole. We're going to have Nicole take it away now. We're a little bit done with the policy and me reminding you do's and don'ts. And so, oh, sorry, Nicole, I'm going to move away from the thing there, and I'm going to mute myself, and you're going to take it away.
Okay, thanks, Neil. I'm just going to get to my slide. So I'm going to quickly go through these slides because this is a repeat for some of you, but I just want to quickly go over some of the navigation changes just so that, just to make sure that any new folks that are joining us gets a quick walkthrough of the navigation. So once you log into NOVA and you select AEBG under Funds, you'll be directed to the main consortium dashboard, which is now labeled Consortia and Members. And from here, you can scroll through the list to find your consortium or use the filters at the top of the screen. And kind of jumping around a little bit here. Okay, so you can also navigate directly to your consortium's member agency pages from the screen by clicking on the arrow that's located next to the name of your consortia. So this screenshot shows links to Allen Hancock Consortium and their member agencies. And these links will take you directly to whichever pages you click on. Okay, so once you click on the link for your consortium, you'll be directed to the main consortia page. This page is where you can update consortia level information, such as contacts and allocations, and where consortium level documents are housed. So the following screenshots just give you a preview of what this page looks like. As you scroll down through the main consortium page, you will find a list of the member agency pages and the allocations section. The allocations section is where you will click to complete your allocation amendments, and we'll go over this process shortly. So this screenshot shows the scroll through to the bottom of the main consortia page, and this is where the member budgets and work plans can be accessed. And here we have a screenshot of the member agency page, and this is where member level contacts can be updated and member work plans and budgets can be accessed as well. Okay, so now on to allocation amendments. As you recall, this section is on the main consortia page. So to change your consortia allocations, the consortia primary contact is the only one that would have access to this. You would navigate to the allocation section on your consortia's main page, and then you would click on the link that says, click here to amend members' allocations. And once you click on that link, you'll be directed to this page, which will allow you to update your 17-18 allocations and click Save. Once you click Save, the affected member budgets will automatically be open to complete budget revisions based on the changes. We're going to go over how to complete a budget revision in Nova in a minute, but first Neil has some information to share regarding expense reporting.
All right. Thanks, Nicole. That was quick. I think I blinked and I missed a lot of it.
We have a lot of content to cover, so I'm just trying to get through it.
Okay, here's just a few reminder due dates. Not to overwhelm you. Don't try to do this all at once. Take this one step at a time. So coming up, here's the big June 30th deadline. Today is the 15th. So a couple of weeks from now, your member expenditure reports and any budget changes should be certified by everyone up to the consortia director related to year-to-date Q3. And Nicole's going to talk a little bit about expenditure reporting. But for now, just know that the end of this month is when everything needs to be certified. If you have members that haven't submitted, that's fine. You still have 2 weeks. I mean, that puts the burden on the consortia lead to do the certification within 2 weeks, as well as cajole their member to get that report finalized. But we let you guys work that out. We're not going to say, oh, they missed the June 1st deadline. That's okay. You guys work with them. You have until June 30th. And so in past webinars, we showed you that 90-day cycle. So you really, once the quarter ends, you have 90 days to get that report in. So that gives you plenty of time to work through a lot of the kind of reconciling and invoicing and purchase orders that might get caught up from the previous quarter. So hopefully that helps. Oh, that was my computer, I guess, trying to move me along. Then August 15th, you have July. July is pretty free, except for August 1st. I guess you've got to get your final student data reports in, but that's not fiscal. But anyway, that's the big kind of due date coming up in July. End of July is your student data is due for end of the year. August 15th is your annual plan, and we'll cover that later in today's webinar of how that's going to work. And then starting September 1st, members can enter their Q4, their final end of the year financial reports. They are to be certified by the consortia by September 30th. So technically you have until September 30th to get all those fourth quarter reports in and certified at the consortia level. At the same time though, keep in mind, once the annual plans get submitted August 15th, consortia members can start working on their work plans and budgets for 18-19. So as you're closing out 17-18, you're also opening up your work plan and budgets for 18-19. Those are technically due by members by the end of September, and then the consortia has until October 30th to certify. And then the first Q1 would be December 1st, certified by the consortium by the end of December. That's kind of how things are rolling out. I'm not including all the student reporting cycle in this. This is just fiscal. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of how busy your summer, fall, and winter will be. So let's see. Erica says, "What is the deadline to revise the budget plan?" So Erica, you can revise that budget plan for Q3 up until June 30th. So if you can work it out where your member is waiting, submits the budget change, it gets approved, then they go in and put expenses in, it's approved, and then the consortia director certifies it. You could do that all in one day on June 30th. That doesn't always happen, because people are away, vacations, things like that. But it's really up to you, Erica, of how you manage budget approvals, expenditure reporting, allocation amendments, all that good stuff. Work that through with the consortia lead and the member, and you can pretty much, have up until the final day of the deadline. But that's up to the consortia of how they want to manage their account. So Vivian asks, do members need to make all budget adjustments before June 30th to cover expenses and object codes do not have enough funds, or can we make changes in Q4? Well, we don't accept negative reporting, so you would have to make all those budget adjustments, Vivian, before the expenses are put in there. You can't run negative balances. So yes, you would need to make all budget adjustments before or on June 30th to cover expenses in object codes that do not have enough funds. So Kathy says, will Q4 be year-to-date expenses? Yes. Similar to Q3. So next year, all 4 quarters will be year-to-date. So when we start with Q1, that'll be July 1st through September 30th. And then Q2 will be July 1st through, October to December 30th. So it's, every 3 months, we're adding on another 3 months. It's always year to date. Hopefully that answers that question. Oh, okay. So I think Ryan answered that. Thank you, Ryan. So Annabelle asked, what is the difference between a member work plan and the annual plan? So Annabelle, the annual plan is the consortia plan every year that states their strategies for how the consortia is going to operate. And it can list up, as many strategies as you want. You could have like 30 strategies that your consortia is going to work on for the year. Then the work plan is how the members are going to tie in to that annual plan at the consortia level. So you might have 30 strategies that you're working on for the annual plan, but a certain member might only be focused on 5 of those. And that's their work plan. That's how they're going to spend their money. So they develop a budget, and then they develop a work plan based on those strategies, which are a subset of the annual plan. So hopefully that makes sense. Anna, can we change the budget after June 30th? So you can change the budget at any time. It just depends on what quarter you're in. So we'd like to get all the budget changes for Q3 done by June 30th so you can report your expenses by June 30th. If you don't have enough time, you can do the budget change in Q4. You can do it in Q1, any quarter. You just can't report negative expenses. You have to have a positive reporting there, but you can make that change. I would work with your consortia director because they have to approve this. So technically, we'd like to give the consortia director 30 days to review everything. So if you're doing budget changes on June 30th, that doesn't give the consortia director any time to review it. So these should have been done. That's why we gave the member stuff due by June 1st. We give the consortia director 30 days, just like you guys had 60 days, 90-day cycle. So hopefully, Anna, you can work with your consortia director on that and find out what's an acceptable timeline for them on when to submit budget changes and how soon they can approve that and when to submit expenditures. So D. Gland says, can we wait and revise budget plans prior to Q4 and then it will match for the entire year? You could do that. You just can't run negatives, or you can't back out prior expenditures. So I guess you could do that. You could put in, your total amounts and then maybe do some changes. Just make sure that if you report expenditures, you're not going to back those out as well. So I think that's an okay strategy. You just got to make sure when reporting expenditures that you report real expenditures and not have to change it, because that could present problems if it's a negative balance or if you have to back out expenditures. Okay, and then you said providing no negative balances. Correct. So I would say that's a good to go on that one. Annabelle, are there examples of what a work plan looks like? So everyone submitted a work plan for this year into Nova. So Annabelle, you can go into Nova and you can pull up any of the work plans that your members submitted. You can go into 70 other consortia and look at all their member work plans. So there's probably 400 examples out there for you to look through. Oh, okay. So Ryan kind of answered that one. And okay. So moving along, I see some people typing. So Bronca says also there should be an audit trail for expenditures for each member at their agency's fiscal office. Am I correct? So Bronca, when the member submits and certifies that budget every quarter, we're assuming their fiscal person, their accounting person, their CFO, their CBO has checked those numbers when it's submitted. So it's not the consortia director's responsibility to see if all the purchase orders were captured, the timesheets were coded correctly, if the account code structure covered all the costs. That's on the fiscal people at the district level. So when they submit that in Nova, and there's a box they have to check that says, I am adhering to, the accounting principles, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, Nicole has the language on that. Maybe she can show you that in a few minutes, but that's up to them. And so they should have some backup, whatever the policy is at their district office. And maybe that's something the consortia wants to work out as far as a bylaw when you're going through this process. What do you want to see, or what are they committing to at the district level? So we'll leave that up to you guys to decide. But there are some caveats when you click on to certify and submit these reports. There's certain things you have to adhere to and you're signing off on. So Yvette says, do all funds for 16-17 carryover and 17-18 need to be expensed by September 1st final report? Or will these funds carry over with 18-19? So they will carry over depending on if you hit the 60% target. If you didn't hit that 60% target for this year, then you will have to do a corrective action plan explaining why. And if it sounds good, then we'll allow you to carry that over for another 6 months into next year. And then you will program that in Nova. So yes, you can, but with the caveat that you have to do a corrective action plan and you have to explain why you did that.
So Neil, but it's
any
the
other-
16,
Go ahead.
17 funds that need to be expended by September 1st, correct?
What's that again, Nicole?
It's the 16, 17 funds that need to be expended. Is that correct?
So yes and no. So the 16-17 funds, the way we've set up the spending targets is they should be expended, by that Q4 date. But if they weren't, and you filed a corrective action plan, we can give you an additional 6 months. But if you get in a habit of missing targets and filing corrective action plans, that could lead to targeted technical assistance. And if it doesn't improve, then your consortia could say you're an ineffective member and reduce your fund. So there are consequences with corrective action, and so you have to be careful that you don't abuse that process. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So Salinas Valley is typing. And here I'm just going to show you the targets because Nicole's got a lot of stuff to cover. So 60% of carryover and new funds must be spent by Q4. This Q3, it's 45. So each quarter it goes up 15%, as you can see. And this is kind of just what we covered. So I'm going to move along. And then we're still working on this, but in the final report, along with your Q4 end of the year expenses, we'll also ask you to report expenses by program. And then we'll also ask for your CTE program charges. We're trying to get an idea because the legislature wants to know how much we spend on CTE because some are fee-based, some are not. And so they want to get a handle on that if they want to put a price tag on that to make CTE free. What would that cost? So we'll be collecting information on that. And the other stuff we already kind of covered. And over to Nicole. But Nicole, let me answer this last question. Are you going to provide more info about corrective action plans? Do you reach out to individual member districts that need targeted technical assistance? Or should the consortia leads take action? Wonder how the process works. So, I mean, each corrective action plan is probably going to be on a case-by-case basis depending on their needs. And so we'll evaluate that. I think the consortia lead should also evaluate that and maybe take some action before it got to the state and having to file that. And so I think you're right in both regards. I think the consortia lead should take early action to prevent that. And if it didn't happen, and we read that and we contact the consortia lead, at least they can give us an update of how things are going, and then we can make that determination if it needs some state assistance or things are working itself out and you're taking care of it locally, those kind of things. So I think it's going to happen on a case-by-case basis, but I think the consortia lead needs to take command of the situation before it gets to that. So there's at least some proactive actions taking place prior to state involvement. And then lastly, would operational costs be broken out by program area as well? Crystal, I think you're going to have to prorate that. Depending on how you break out your operational costs, it's difficult. I don't know if you use like student population or percentages or whatever, but you will have to somehow include those operational costs in that breakout by program. And maybe if you do it percentage-wise based on some standard, I think that would be the most we can hope for. Okay, and Beatrice asks, Neil, since we will have to start reporting by program, is there a template that shows what the final report looks like? Not yet. We're still working on it, but we'll have, as soon as it becomes available, we'll let you guys take a look at it. All right. So Nicole, take it away.
All right, thanks, Neil. So I'm gonna go over how to do a budget revision in these next few screenshots. So the member representative or member contact should navigate to their member agency page, scroll to the bottom of the page, and then click on the budget and work plan link, which is shown here. And so I just also want to point out that before a budget revision can be completed, the consortia primary contact must first uncertify the budget. If a budget is in certified status, it is not editable, it's locked down. But so once the budget has been uncertified, it will be opened up to make changes. And so this screenshot shows the member agency budget in certified status. To uncertify, the consortia primary contact would navigate to this page and click on the uncertify button that's located on the top right side of the screen. And once the budget has been uncertified, it will appear as being in draft status, which is shown in this screenshot, and will now be opened up to make changes. So in order to revise the budget, the member representative or contact should navigate to the member budget and work plan section and then click on Budget, which is located on the left blue navigation pane. This screenshot shows the budget section, and this is where you will update your budget by object code to reflect any changes. In this example, the allocation was changed, and as a result, the budget needs to be revised to account for the reduction in funds. So once you have revised your budget, the amount listed under remaining amount should be 0. This indicates that your budget balances. And once the budget revision has been completed, the consortium primary contact will need to recertify the budget. The member representative needs to first submit the budget so that the consortia primary contact can recertify the budget. And I'm going to mention this again as we get into the expenditure reporting, but budgets need to be in certified status in order to be able to access the expenditure reporting template. So in these next few slides, I'm going to go over how to complete the expenditure report in Nova. Before we get started, I want to point out that allocation amendments and budget revisions need to be completed prior to the submission of the expenditure report. And again, budgets must be in certified status in order to access the fiscal reporting page for your agency. We don't have any specific deadlines as far as allocation amendments and budget revisions, so you'll need to work with your consortia primary contact. But you want to make sure that all of these things are completed and wrapped up and the budget is back in certified status before you can access your expenditure report and submit your expenditure report. So to access the expenditure reports, once you log into Nova, select AEBG under Funds, and then click on Fiscal Reporting, which is located on the left blue navigation pane. This will bring you to the Fiscal Reporting dashboard. From here, you can scroll through the list to find your consortia or use the filter located at the top of the screen. You can also search for previously submitted reports by using the fiscal year and period filters that are located at the top of the screen. Before you click into your consortia to complete your report, be sure that quarter 3 is selected under the period filter. For expenditure reports that were due on June 1st, you only need to complete the 3rd quarter report as expenditure reporting is year to date. So once you click on your consortia, it will direct you to this page where you will find all of your member agencies' quarterly reporting templates. Again, you will only find the reporting template for the member agencies that have a budget that's in certified status. If their budget is still in draft status, they will not appear here in this section. You'll also notice at the top of the page, a summary is displayed, which shows the submittal status of prior quarters and the certification status of the current reporting period. You'll also notice that since in Nova we're jumping into quarter 3, because we did not have the system available for quarter 1 and quarter 2, we've gone ahead and auto-submitted the quarter 1 and quarter 2 reports. So when you click on your consortia in the fiscal reporting page, under the submittal status summary, you should see green check marks for quarter 1 and quarter 2 for all of your members. If that is not the case and you have quarter 1 and quarter 2 reports that are not submitted for some of your members, this could be a result of the fact that the budget was not in certified status at the time of when the CFAD was submitted. So that created kind of a glitch in the system. That is something that we've just become aware of. So there is a way to correct that, which I'll go over in the next few slides, or you can contact me and I can help you with that. But again, I want to reiterate, it is not necessary to complete an expenditure report for quarter 1 and quarter 2. So as you scroll through the screen, you will find all of the member agency expenditure reporting templates. And again, only the member contacts and member representatives will have the ability to enter and submit information for their agency. For the quarter 3 report, you would enter your expenditure information under the quarter 3 tab under the column labeled year-to-date expenditure. I'm going to quickly review the other columns that are shown here. The year-to-date forecast column is a new concept that we are introducing for AEBG for fiscal year 18-19, and this is intended to serve as a planning tool. For fiscal year 18-19, this tool will be part of the budget submission process. And we will have more information to share in the coming weeks, and we will also host a webinar to provide more detailed information as to how the forecasting will work in relation to the spending targets. But for now, the forecast column has been pre-populated with the spending targets for that quarter, which for quarter 3 is 45%. The remaining columns show the percentage of expenditures in relation to the forecast and to the overall budget, as well as the remaining budget amount. If your expenditures fall below the spending targets, you will be required to enter an explanation before the report can be submitted. And you'll notice that that section is highlighted in red. You will not be able to access the submit button until there is a narrative that's entered into that box. And upon submission of the report, you will need to check the box that states, I have complied with the academic expenditure clause. There will be a link that will pull up a PDF once you click on it. And this box is to certify that this report has been prepared in accordance with the applicable state regulations, that information in this report is accurate and true to the best of your knowledge, and that any information is supported by documentation on file at the district or college. In addition, there's also a field for you to provide a brief summary of activities for this quarter in your expenditure reporting template. This field is not required. However, if you're a member agency, you'll want to check with your consortia lead to check with them to see what kind of information they're looking for there, and if they would like you to fill out that field when you're submitting your report. Okay, so when the expenditure report is ready to be submitted, the member representative should click on the Submit Quarter 3 button, which is located on the bottom right side of the screen in their reporting card. The member representative is the only user role that can submit the expenditure reports. The member contact has the ability to enter and edit information, but only the member rep can submit. And once the member representative submits their report, the status will change to submitted, as you can see on the lower right side of the screen. And once the report is submitted, the submit button then changes to display unsubmit quarter 3. Member representatives can unsubmit and revise their report up until the time that the consortia primary contact certifies the expenditure reports. But once the consortia primary contact certifies the reports, it kind of locks everything down. So if an adjustment needs to be made to a report after it has been certified, the consortia primary contact will need to uncertify the reports first before the report can be unsubmitted. So we'll go over this in the slides to follow.
Nicole, we just have a
Yes.
quick question. So I don't know if you remember last webinar, Jody made the suggestion of changing the dates under Q1, Q2, Q3 to indicate, the year to date. It's July 1 to September 30th, Q1. Q2 is July 1 to December 31st. Does that show up in the new current NOVA screenshots, or if they went on right now, would they show the dates, or is it still showing the quarters? That's the question.
Last I
Because the
checked, I
quarters
think
are. Oh, go ahead.
yes, last time I checked, I think it still showed that, but I have made that in my notes that we will take care of that. So I apologize.
Okay.
It's coming.
Right. All right, and then one other question for you. Corley asks, what level of detail do we provide in the explanation if they're below targets? Do we have long summaries or short statements? What's your advice on that?
I would say that a brief statement is okay. Concise is always good, as long as it adequately explains the reason why expenditures have fallen below the target. And if there's, I would also note if there's any plans to bring the expenditures back up, or any challenges you've experienced as to why expenditures have fallen below, and what you're doing moving forward to get expenditures back up to where they need to be.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. So once all of the member reports are submitted, the consortia primary contact will be able to certify by clicking on the Certify Quarter 3 report button, which is located at the top right side of the screen, which is shown in this screenshot. The NOVA system will not allow the reports to be certified until all of the expenditure reports have been submitted by all member agencies. And so if you have a member agency that has a budget that's in certified status, NOVA will expect that an expenditure report will need to be submitted for that member, and the consortia lead will not be able to certify that quarter report until all of those reports have been submitted. So that goes back to the question, if you have a member that does not receive funding and they have a zero budget, then it's best to leave their budget in draft status so that the system will not think that a report needs to be submitted for that member. And also the primary contact only needs to certify once for the entire consortia. So if you're the consortia primary contact, you're going to want to wait until, or the system will only allow you to certify until all of the reports have been submitted, you've reviewed all of them, and you certify at one time for all of the members. Okay, so this screenshot shows the expenditure reports certified at the consortia level, and you'll notice that the certify button has changed to display uncertified Q3 report. So this is how the consortia lead can toggle back and forth between the certified and uncertified status in case a revision or a change needs to be made. So this completes the expenditure reporting for today's presentation. So before we move on, I just want to check to see if there are any questions about any of the information we've discussed today.
There's a few, Nicole. There's a lot of people typing, but I really only see one question we haven't answered. Paige says, can we get NOVA fiscal training for our fiscal people to come to Sacramento? Ryan has set up some nice YouTube videos and things like that, but what do we do for those people that need specific hands-on NOVA training? Do you want to think about that, or do you have suggestions to offer?
Well, I can say I've been working with consortia leads, so I'm happy to be a resource, and I have had kind of one-on-one phone calls with folks to kind of walk them through the system. So if that's a need that you have either at the consortia level or at the member level, I'm happy to do so. And you can contact the AEBG TAP inbox and just let them know that's the kind of assistance that you need, and I can work to set up a time with you.
Okay, and then if you could clarify how the expenditures are reported, because Ilya says in the past expenditure reports on paper were submitted cumulatively. For example, Q1 the 3,000s, 20,000s, and Q2 3,000 was reported at 40,000, etc. But now it appears there is a year-to-date column which would double reporting entries. Is that the case, or is there a science to this?
I don't believe so. Let me go back to that screenshot. So the year-to-date column is actually where you're entering your expenditures. So if you look at the screenshot that I scrolled back to, you enter your expenditures in this field. So for Q3, the year-to-date column is editable right now. The member contact or member rep would enter their expenditures for that quarter as it is year-to-date, and then click submit. Once you click submit, it kind of locks it down. So I don't know if that's the screenshot or the column that you're looking at.
Yeah, I think she was just looking at the old way we used to do things and thinking that when you put something in the year to date, you're duplicating maybe the original entry. But what we're saying is that is the original entry, is the year to date key entry. So maybe they just have to go through it a few times to get the hang of it.
Yes, and then one thing to note is as you move from reporting period, so when you go into the Q4 reports, Q4, while it's going to be open for you to edit, it will pre-populate what you reported in Q3, because the assumption is that since you already reported that amount for Q3, that at a minimum, that's where your expenditures are for that object code. But of course, you would have to edit or confirm that so if there haven't been any additional expenditures in that object code, then you could leave that alone If there have been, then you would just need to update that amount before you submit.
Okay, and I can take this one, Nicole. Is there a list of specific things to look at to certify? And this is from Salinas. Obviously, bottom lines are easy to check, and you said to check the indirect rate, other specifics. So the main thing we want consortia leads to do for certification is to check when the expenses come in, see if those expenses are aligned with the work plan that the member submitted. So every year the member has to submit a work plan and a budget based on the annual plan. And they have to select strategies out of the annual plan for them to work on to put all that money towards. So when they submit expenditures, you should be looking at, does this follow the work plan? Is this aligned with what they said they wanted to do in their work plan? You don't have to get into checking, does that 5,000 mean, did they approve their equipment? Do they have a procurement process? Is there a maintenance? This and that. That's all done at the district level. At the consortia level, you're checking for the planning, to the funding, and how that's working out. So really, it's high level. But if they said they were going to, purchase a building and there's nothing in capital outlay, or if they said they were going to hire 20 teachers and open a new site and they're not reporting any class instructional salaries, then that could be a red flag for you. And let's see. So Erica says annual expenses by program will be required to report in 18-19. Unfortunately, we're going to ask that for September for 17-18. So when you're closing out your final report for 17-18, we're going to see if you can give us by program your expenses for 17-18. So it's coming really quick. And I think that's it. Nicole, did you want to cover the reporting tip? I think that's your slide.
Yes, and I just want to acknowledge Laura's question that I don't believe that the if you run a year-to-date expenditure report that it would duplicate your expenditures. The system is set up for year-to-date reporting. But I will check into that, and I don't know if Ryan has any comments on that.
Okay.
Okay.
So there is
well,
one question I can.
No, I don't have a comment. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Trying to figure it out.
Okay.
Okay.
And Nicole, I can answer the Glance's question. I'm still not understanding the 5% fiscal agent expense. Does the funding come out of our apportionment prior to us receiving it? If not, what is the 5% coded to? I think I will email you separately. So the 5% is something negotiated after you get your allocation. It's not taken away unless you agreed upon it in the initial allocations. So, and it could be, it doesn't have to be a fiscal agent expense. It's what you agree upon that administrative activities to be. And so that's negotiated on. Some people negotiate it up front. So this member always gets additional funding to cover the fiscal. In some cases, it's negotiated afterwards. Like if you're direct funded, then everybody throws money into a pot, or they agree that so-and-so will get a little extra to cover these costs, and you agree upon what those activities will be. So it'll vary from consortia to consortia of how you discuss and negotiate those administrative costs at the consortia level. Basically, how are you going to run your consortia? And that's why having that consortia level report is going to be important, because it'll map out all those program and administrative expenses. But those will be after the member gets their funding. And so that's why we're going to have that on a separate report, so it doesn't duplicate what you're reporting in NOVA. Because you've already reported that. This is just kind of an activity based on that money you're getting. So hopefully that makes sense, but you can email me directly afterwards. Brenda says grants are also used to cover program costs. Well, this isn't a grant, this is apportionment. I'm not sure of the question, cover program costs. Maybe if you can be more specific, because this is not a grant. So it's treated as apportionment or ADA. And I'll let Nicole, why don't you, I'll respond to these in the chat while you move on because we have some more slides to go. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to reiterate a few of the tips I think that I've already kind of covered, but budgets must be in certified status before the expenditure report can be submitted. The member representative must submit the budget before the consortia primary contact can certify. Member contacts can enter and edit expenditure report information, but only the member representative can submit the report. The consortia primary contact is the only user role that can certify the expenditure reports. And again, expenditures are reported as year to date, and as a result, Q1 and Q2 have been auto-submitted, and it's not necessary to submit a report for Q1 and Q2.
All right. So Brenda, I'll get back to you in a second. I've got to cover these slides. We're going to go through them quick, Nicole and I, because we're kind of running out of time. So annual plan, really quick. Submitted August 15th. You know that. It's based on the current 3-year plan because it got an extension. So really you're working on the 4th year of the existing 3-year plan. It'll be the same as last year's annual plan, and we'll kind of show you the slides. It'll have an executive summary, it'll have strategies, and it'll have a small fiscal section. You have room to add as many strategies as you want, because it's critical to have those strategies, because those strategies tie into your member's work plan. So if for some reason your member wants to work on something and it's not a strategy, then they'll have no strategy to tie to in the annual plan for their budget. So work with your members on this annual plan. It requires all their approval, so hopefully they're aware of that. And annual plan will drive member work plans and budgets, which are due to be certified by consortia directors by September 30th. Actually, submitted by September 30th, certified by the consortia leads October 30th. Sorry about that. And then quickly, just some tips. The annual plan is hierarchical. The 3-year plan aligns with the state's AEBG vision and goals. This aligns with the original framework in AB 86. So then the annual plan ties into those strategies that helps you with those goals. And then these strategies in the annual plan will be used by your members, so you can see how it cascades down. Members select a specific number of strategies from the annual plan to focus on from July 1st to June 30th. They select these by checking a box. They don't have to rewrite them or provide additional information. It's just a checkbox. So it should be pretty simple. And then lastly, the strategies in the work plan for the members must tie in to their budget for 18-19. I guess we had some problems last year when we brought some of the annual plan strategies over. They weren't as detailed or specific, so people had problems with that. This budget includes not only your new 18-19 funds, but also any carryover. So that would be one budget. You could have 16-17 carryover. If we approve it, you could have 17-18 carryover, and you could have 18-19 new funds all into one budget and one expenditure report each quarter. Although the state AEBG office doesn't require a member tactical or activity plan along with their annual plans to show who's doing what and when, your consortia can require that members follow up with such a plan so they can track that at public meetings to show who's doing what. So that's up to your consortia to provide or require more detail. And then on the website under planning, under state, we have the annual plan tips guide. We have a lot of NOVA functionality. We have a YouTube page. We have a user's manual. We have question and answers. We have an annual plan video. We have other NOVA videos. And so these are all available on the website, the NOVA website, as well as the AEBG website. We put them in a couple of places. And then Nicole, if you want to quickly walk them through how the annual plan looks on the website, on NOVA, that would be great.
Okay, thanks, Neil. All right, so to access the 18-19 annual plan template for your consortium, navigate to your consortium's main page and scroll down to the annual plan section, which is shown here. Click on the first document, which should be a hyperlink, and the status should also indicate that it is in draft status. So this is now where your annual plan document will be housed, and once it becomes member approved, it will also be in the same location. And once you click on this link, you'll be directed to the annual plan template, which is shown here. And there are 8 sections of the annual plan, which include plans and goals, gaps in service, seamless transitions, student acceleration, professional development, leveraging resources, fiscal management, and lastly, the preview and submit section. And I've already received a couple of questions on this, but right now, only the consortia primary contact can access this template. The annual plan process is going to work in the same manner that the CFAD process did, in that the consortia primary contact is responsible for entering all the information, clicking through all the fields and entering everything in, and then submitting it. And then the member representatives will then have an opportunity to review what has been submitted and then certify, either approve or reject the annual plan. So if you've already gone through the CFAD process, technically it's going to work in the exact same way. And also, one thing I want to note is that as you complete the required fields in each section of your annual plan, a green check mark will appear on the left blue navigation pane. Okay, so I think Neil has some tips about completing the annual plan.
Right. So here are the tips. And you're not even being charged for any of these tips. So in the executive summary for your annual plan, you can explain how your allocations are consistent with your 3-year plan. You can explain the transition between the old plan and maybe you're already doing some new 3-year planning that's due next year. You can explain that. You can also explain how you're building on what you did last year or what you have been doing, how you're learning along the way, which may result in some changes along the way. We're not asking every year for you to recreate the wheel. It's okay to say you're building on stuff. You might have the same strategies from last year. Some of these things take years to develop. The annual plan would reflect any adjustment from last year. So do I have another tip sheet? Yeah. Feel free to use the executive summary, express and explain any critical innovation that's going on that might not be reflected in the objectives, and also use the regional planning overview box to include or describe any progress you've made on the next 3-year plan that's going to be due in May and June of next year. I think back to Nicole.
Okay, thanks, Neil. So one thing that I forgot to mention was that if you are a member representative or member contact and you would like to see the template for the annual plan, your consortia primary contact does have the ability to generate a PDF form of the template. So I would connect with your consortia primary contact and ask them to generate that PDF and send it out to all the members if you'd like to see the questions and the prompts before it's submitted for your review. So in the following screenshots, I'm going to quickly show you the rest of the sections of the annual plan so that you can just get a sense of what it looks like. Neil will go over the content of these sections shortly, or I believe he has some tips for the actual completion of the annual plan. So this screenshot shows the gaps in service section in which you are asked to identify the strategies in this area. One thing I want to note is that please be sure to list each individual strategy in its own field, as the annual plan will feed into the member work plans where members will need to select the individual strategies that they'll be working on. So to do so, at the end of each section, you will see like a little add button that says, in this case, it says add another gap in service button. Each section where you have to list strategies will have this add button in relation to that section so that you can add each strategy. But you'll want to make sure that each strategy is listed in its own field. Otherwise, that's going to throw off the ability for the members to check off the specific strategies that they're working on when they go to submit their work plan and budget for 18-19. And so again, very quickly, this screenshot shows the seamless transition section. Again, there's a button at the bottom of the screen to add additional strategies. This screenshot shows the student acceleration section. This next page shows the professional development section. And this section shows the leveraging resources section. So we have 2 additional sections to show, but first Neil will go over some tips for completing your annual plan.
Okay, so for those who have hung in to the last 5 minutes, these are the most important tips you can get in the entire webinar. So it's okay to copy and paste. It's a shortcut, but we want to give you shortcuts. So you can copy and paste from last year's annual plan, or modify existing strategies that are ongoing. You can have a mixture of new or existing strategies, that's fine. If your annual plan is similar to the prior year, please do your best to describe what's different. You know, maybe you started doing this effort last year and you've made some progress, but you're still continuing that effort. Explain, what progress you've made, those kind of things. And maybe you've completed certain action steps, or maybe not at all. Explain why the delays or something. Maybe it's a building or something, those kind of things. Very flexible. It's your plan. You need to make this workable for you. And I think, and then lastly, your annual plan can consist of implementing existing strategy. As we know, some of the strategies are long-term in nature, and I've kind of said that a few times, but just one more time. So I think we're back to Nicole.
Okay, thanks, Neil. So just again, very quickly, this screenshot shows the fiscal management section and shows what the 2 prompts look like over here in this section. And lastly, the last section, which is the preview and submit. So once the consortia primary contact has completed all of the sections of the annual plan, they should navigate to the preview section to perform a final review of all of the information that they've entered, and then click on the submit button, which is located on the top right side of the screen. So once the annual plan is submitted, the member representatives will receive an email notifying them that the annual plan is ready for their review and approval. And there will be a link in the email that will direct the member representative to the preview section of the annual plan. Of course, similar to the way the CFAB process worked, if the member rep does not receive that email, they can always log into Nova and navigate to the annual plan section, to the preview page, where they should be able to find their name and review and approve or reject the annual plan.
And Nicole, quick question from Jody. And you might have covered this. Do all members have access in Nova to add strategies, or is it only the primary contact can add the strategies?
Yes, only the primary contact has the ability to enter information for the annual plan. It's working the same way that the CFAB process did, where the consortia primary contact enters the information, adds the strategies, and then submits it. The member representatives review and approve or reject the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so once the member representative navigates to the preview section of the annual plan, they will see their name listed and options under their name to either approve or reject the annual plan, which is shown here. So here we have a few people that have already approved, and we have 1 member representative that has not yet reviewed or submitted a selection. So if a member representative chooses to reject the annual plan, a pop-up window will appear for them to provide any comments regarding their rejection. These comments will be sent in the form of an email to the consortia primary contact, as well as all of the other member representatives. And so this screenshot shows a member representative that has rejected the annual plan, and this is what it looks like. If the annual plan is rejected by our member representative, then it is reverted to draft status. And this means that the consortia primary contact will have to make the necessary edits to address the reasons why it was rejected, and then they will need to resubmit and go through the review and approval process with all of the members again. Also, if you have submitted your annual plan and you realize you need to make a change, the easiest way is to have one of your members reject the plan, which will then open it up for you to go back in and make your changes and then resubmit. So this screenshot shows a member representative that that's a little bit behind and has not reviewed the annual plan yet. You'll notice that there's an option for the consortia primary contact to send a reminder directly from the system. So you can, as the consortia lead, you'll probably want to navigate this page to see who has reviewed, who has approved, and send your reminders. And once all of the member representatives have approved the annual plan, the status will change to member approved and will be considered as officially submitted. And that's all the information that I have to share regarding the annual plan process. I know it was rather quick. It does work in the same way that the CFAD process did. So hopefully this is kind of the second time around for most of you kind of doing this process. But let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to check the chat.
Okay, and Selena's had a question about the carryover box, but maybe we can answer that with the last few minutes we have. Just quickly, so we're working on the 3-year plan slides or Nova input. It's not up and running yet, but we are working on what that looks like. We're looking at big buckets like evaluation of need, evaluation of types and levels of services, evaluation of leverage funds, your actual 3-year plan, strategies, activities, alignment with other education workforce plans and member certification. We're trying to utilize existing information. So if we already have the census data, if we already have data from TOPS Pro and MIS that shows student characteristics or student barriers, we want to make that available. We also want to make available current enrollment numbers by program. So we want to do a lot of the stuff that you don't have to do, that you can focus on answering questions like, what is my need? Who are my students? Why are some students coming to my program and their neighbor or their cousin isn't? You know, am I offering classes in where the need is? Why the gap? Or how are we meeting that gap? Are we covering everything in the region? What's our plan to do that? Are we using strategies and best practices like contextualized instruction, accelerated learning? How are we dealing with transition of students to post-secondary and to workforce? You know, all that kind of stuff. We want you to focus on those big evaluation and action type questions rather than chasing data around. So we'll do the best we can of getting every ounce of available data that we have through our systems to make that available to you to help you with that planning. So more to follow on this. Just wanted to give you some updates on that. Look for more over the summer. And let's go back to the questions really quick because I think we're over time. And I think last plug for, we have a new website, caladulted.org. Make sure it's in your search engine, your bookmark, all that good stuff. It's moving up on Google as more people access it. And if you have questions, and I think we put that in the chat before, or want to set up training, go to TAP and schedule for professional development, or if you have questions or follow-up or don't know where something is, they are your go-to people. So really quickly, back on the questions for the fiscal management section on describe your approach to incorporating remaining carryover. Anything you can do explaining why the carryover isn't spent. Is there something going on there, or is it a consortia level carryover? Any kind of details you can provide, and what's the process that you work through to figuring out how you're going to spend down that carryover. Any kind of those details would be important in that section. And then JC said, lots of good information like drinking water from a fire hose. I think I will listen to the recording again. Yeah, we apologize. We extended it to an hour and a half, but there was a lot of information. And we will continue to have these webinars. I think we have more webinars than any other program that I know. So I guess you got that going for you, right? Okay. And Nicole, anything else to say before we close out? Because we're at time.
No, once again, I wanted to thank Veronica at AEBG TAP as always helping us navigate these websites and all of the questions that come through. Thanks for everyone that's on today's webinar, and thank you for all of your feedback regarding the system. You know, we need to hear from you to see if it's working, and we're not always aware of things, so we really appreciate hearing from you.
And we also thank Ryan for being available to answer those tough questions if they ever come
Yes.
up. So
Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Neil.
All right, and Nicole, once again, you hit it out of the park. So we've got to keep you around. You can't go anywhere. So hopefully you'll get some rest this weekend, and then Monday you'll probably be inundated with NOVA questions again. So we encourage any questions. We want to make this work, and we'll continue to have these webinars and answer questions to help you along with the process, because it's only Q3, so we still got one more quarter left. So we'll get this right by the end of the year. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Neil and Nicole, and thank you all for participating in today's webinar. I am about to close the webinar. Once I do, the evaluation will appear on your screen. Please be sure to fill it out to let Nicole, Neil, and Ryan know what you thought about today's webinar, and also if there are any technical assistance or professional development needs you have at this time. Thank you all so much, and have a great weekend.